All right, welcome everyone. My name is Coach David, and today we're going to be doing something slightly different. We're going to be talking a little bit about admissions and what you guys should be kind of preparing for, and also about financial aid and what parents and students need to be doing to be ready for both the admission season and also the financial aid season. So, once again, right, if you're just joining us right now, please go ahead and put your student's grade in the chat. It'll help me understand kind of the families that are coming and also make sure that I can answer any questions better about that you ask later on. Okay. So just kind of going into what we're going to be talking about today. I always like to talk a little bit about financial aid news, right? Then we'll be talking about juniors, right? What you need to be doing on the admission side, what you need to be doing on the financial aid side, and then we'll talk about, and we'll always have our little Q&A session at the end so that families can ask questions. Okay. Now, if it's your first time here, welcome. My name's Coach David. Again, I apologize. I might be clearing my throat a little bit. It's a little bit scratchy today, but I'm a former law school and college admissions reader, and I work with our students and families to make sure that they can get to the colleges that they want, and also that they can pay for college in a way that doesn't make you kind of dig into your retirement or your home's home equity. Okay, so I'm ready to save you guys money, and hopefully, right, we can do some of that here today. So I always like to start off with a little bit of financial aid news. Now, I understand parents, you might not be looking at financial aid news a lot. It's not really a riveting topic, right? But for me, well, that's what, that's one of the areas that I'm very deeply concerned with. And so I do look up a lot of things. One of the things that just came up recently is some good news. I know I always bring up bad news, like this got cut, that got cut. This is happening. So, these colleges are getting sued. Those colleges are getting sued. But today, there's some good news, right? A lot of colleges have been following this model, but the good news is that Yale is the latest college that has joined the group of colleges that provides free tuition to families that make under $200,000 a year, right? Now, this isn't a full ride. It doesn't mean that there's no cost associated with colleges, right? Even if they take out tuition, there's still about $30,000 in costs that you still have to pay, right? Room and board, right? Books, transportation, all these different things. But it's still a huge break for families, right? Now, what does this mean? That means that up until last year at Yale, if you made over $200,000, you were still paying a hefty amount, probably close to 60, 70, $80,000 a year, right? That is basically 40% of your income. Not a lot of families can afford that, right? But there are other colleges that also provide this type of kind of situation, right? Yale, obviously, like I just talked about, Harvard, MIT, Princeton, Emory, UPenn, Caltech. If you make under $200,000 a year, this is also the case for you. There's also different tiers, right? For families that are making under 150, colleges like Columbia, Duke, Northwestern, Stanford, Tufts, they say tuition is going to be covered. For families that make under 125, colleges like Dartmouth, Brown, U Chicago, and USC say they're also going to give you tuition free as well. Okay. So again, there's a lot more colleges that are moving in this direction, especially with the changes to financial aid and the limits that have been placed on loans and lending. Right. Again, I'll try to keep you guys as updated as possible every week, so that you guys have the most recent information at your disposal. Okay. But before I get into the training today about what you should be doing as far as your financial aid and your admissions, right? I did want to talk to you guys about the other side, which I'm going to get in today about the admission side, right? And how our company can help, right? So the first thing that we do with all our families that are joining our program is that we book a quick 15-minute consultation with them to see what their student needs. Okay. So if you guys are interested in learning more about our coaching programs and our admissions programs, go ahead and text 949-775-0865. All you have to do is text book. You can also book it on your own by scanning that QR code. So I'll just leave that up for 5 seconds real quick. All right. So again, we deal with all grade levels, right? But generally, we see a lot of, eighth graders, ninth graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, right? We even have, students that are coming to us in 12th grade in the fall to kind of get last minute help. But the earlier you start, the more that we can help. Okay. So again, the phone number one more time, 949-775-0865. All you have to do is text us. We'll ask you some preliminary questions to make sure that you fit into kind of what the services that we provide. And then we can kind of talk further at that 15-minute consultation. Okay. But now let's dive into kind of junior year. I understand that not everyone here is a junior. Okay. And that's okay, right? Because eventually your student will be a junior. And so it's important to understand what you need to be doing at that point in order to make sure that everything is going off without a hitch. Okay. So realistically, for our current juniors, right? Not hypothetical future kind of juniors. For our current juniors, so basically class of 2027, your college applications are 6 months away. Okay. So basically starting in the summer, you need to get on it. You need to working on your essays, working on your apps, all these different pieces. But a lot of people don't know what they should be doing right now. And so again, I created a very abbreviated version of what you should be doing. Okay. So the first thing that people kind of take too long and do too late is planning for the summer. Okay. Now, for all of our kind of junior students that are class of 2027, this is your most important summer. And why do I say it's your most important summer? Because it's the summer right before you're going to turn in your application, right? So the question is, what are you going to be doing, right? Are you going to be following interests, right? Are you going to be bolstering your academics? Are you going to be pushing the rigor that you have in different classes? Are you going to be doing a research or an internship? Is there a program? Is there a camp, right? Now, the one thing that I want to say here is parents, right? Your student is a junior, right? In the summer, they need to be working on their applications. They need to be prepping for the application season. This is not the year to take a 4-week European cruise vacation. Okay. When they're a senior, no problem, right? I understand parents, if you want to go, leave your kid at home. They can cook for themselves. Mac and cheese has been a staple of the teen diet for a long time. Okay. But you need to be figuring out what you're going to do. Now, you might be asking, well, Coach David, why are we planning so early? The problem is that research programs, internship programs, summer programs and camps, classes, class signups, things like that, they're all happening now in February and March, right? So if you don't plan it out and you wait until May to see what's available, well, sorry to say, there's going to be nothing available. Okay. So please, please, please make sure you have a plan for your summer. Okay. On the academic side, there's kind of three different categories of what you should be thinking about. The first is remediation. So any classes that were not passed need to be figured out before applications are due. Okay. So that basically means that they need to be taken care of in the summer or before. I mean, the earliest date is like, let's say October 1st. So before October 1st, you need to have a transcript out. Okay. Now, I do understand that at certain high schools, I'll just give you an example, right? Let's say that you were taking pre-calculus and first semester you got a D, right? Second semester you got a C. Your high school, because you passed the second semester, which is supposed to be a kind of like, mm, it's supposed to like build up upon each other, right? If they see that you passed the second semester, your high school will give you credit for the full year. Okay? No college is going to give you any credit for your D grade. So if you took 4 years of math and pre-calculus was one class that you got a D for a semester, you're only going to have 3.5 classes of math. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay. There's a word for it, but I'm blanking on it right now for some reason. There is a word. It's not acceleration. If it comes to me, I'll definitely let you know. Right. But there's another thing that you could be thinking when it comes to academics, and it's pushing forward, right? If your student is behind in certain subject areas or they really like certain areas, you want to make sure that you're pushing forward. One of the areas that is most pushed forward, and that's not the real term I want to use, but that is most accelerated across the board, across majors, is math. Okay. Let me just give you a statistic that might scare some people, and also some people might be like, "Oh yeah, that's right," right? Obviously, there's a lot of our students that are aiming for top 20 schools. One of those top 20 schools and schools that is known around the world is Harvard. Okay. Now, Harvard, they put out a statistic, and this is for the class that's 2 years ago. Okay. And the statistic was that 95% of students that were accepted for that particular year were at multivariable calculus or above. I'm not talking about engineering majors and physics majors and other STEM majors. They're talking about 95% of all students accepted across all majors. Okay. So math is one of those areas where they just want to see that you're able to do well, right? The logic that is necessary for math is logic that you'll need for most majors. Okay. The third area that you can go into is showing interest. Okay. Now, maybe there's a student, they have a very big interest in environmental science or in business or in coding, whatever it might be, right? You need to be thinking about kind of like, how can I show them that I really have this interest? Whether it's at an online high school, community college, four-year extension program like the UCs have, like UC San Diego Extension, Berkeley Extension, all of them have extensions, right? We love seeing students go further than what their high school offers. Okay. Now, we love seeing it, but it has almost become something that needs to be done, right? If your student is just taking classes at their high school, what student is not? How can they show that they are different than the other 400, 500, 600, 700 seniors at that school if you're just doing what's available at school? So, unfortunately, in today's day and age, just doing the classes available at school is not enough to stand out. So, something to keep in mind as well. Okay. Another thing that juniors need to be thinking about is next year prep. Okay. Course planning is key. Now, there have even been some schools, like in the Bay Area right now, that are already doing course selection for all grades right now in January. Usually, this is something that's done in like March or April. I don't know why they're doing it so early, but nevertheless, they are doing it. But your 12th grade courses do matter. I meet too many students that sign up for classes, and it's like, oh, I wanted an easy senior year schedule. And my first thing that pops out of my mouth, because like again, I'm frustrated that they didn't consult with us, right? If they're part of our program, is your 12th grade courses and the strength of your 12th grade courses matters for the purposes of financial aid. So you cannot coast your senior year. If you were taking five APs junior year and all of a sudden you decide, you know what, I don't want to take math, I don't want to take science, I have to take English to graduate, and I need to take a visual art, I'm going to take those classes, you're in a heap of trouble. Okay. So the other thing I want to say is that TA, library aid, non-academic classes like cooking or auto shop or this or that, they don't really help either. We need to continue with that rigor. Okay. Another piece I'm also going to put out here is that your core classes, math, English, science, history, these are not optional classes. You need to have 4 years or more of each of these throughout your high school career. I see too many students that say, oh, I'm not going to take math senior year. I already have enough to graduate. I'm not going to take science this year. I already have enough to graduate. I'm not going to take AP Lit because AP Lang gives me the credit for college English. We're thinking about two different things here, right? On one side, you have the things that you need in order to graduate from high school. That's one set of requirements. If you fulfill those requirements, you will graduate from high school. I'm not saying that you won't, right? But the question is, will that get you into college? And the answer to that question is no. Okay. So if you do the bare minimum, don't expect any great results. Okay. You need to continue pushing next for your senior year. Okay. Now, if you're not taking certain classes at school because you're taking them outside of high school at a community college or via UC Scout, I totally get it. Right. But across the 4 years, those four core courses should stay there at all times, unless there is a specific reason why it is not. Okay. Another thing that a lot of students forget about junior year and that we definitely need to talk about are recommendations. These are letters of recommendation that you need for your college applications. Okay. Now, not all colleges need these, right? The UCs, you don't need them. CSUs, you don't need them. So don't worry about it for those. But there are a lot of private schools and there are certain out-of-state public schools. One that comes to mind is University of Michigan. A lot of our students apply there. Great school, right? But University of Michigan also asks for letters of recommendation. So, what is the timeline of this? We usually ask the students to talk to their teachers before the end of the year. Okay. And how do you ask them? Well, you go after APs are over. You go and ask them, hey, I'm applying to college in the fall. I'm going to be a senior. I'd love to have your recommendation letter for college, right? That's it. And they're either going to say, sure, I'd love to talk about it. I'd love to do it for you. Or they might say no, or they might give you some kind of weird, wishy-washy answer. Either way, I want your student to go home, write an email to that teacher saying, thanks for talking to me today. I'd love for you to write my recommendation, right? I'll be back in touch in the fall. Okay. And then you leave your teacher alone during the summer because, well, the teacher's not going to respond anyway, right? And, well, the forms change a little bit every year, so the form isn't necessarily even going to be out until August 1st, okay? Then, once school starts, you go and meet up with them, let them know that you're applying to certain colleges, yada, yada, yada. And then you tell them what your first deadline is. Okay. That's what we would want to do as far as timeline, right? Now, as far as who you should ask, this is a question that I get every year, hundreds of times from our students. In a perfect world, I'd want to get one STEM teacher and one humanities or social science teacher, right? It shows different sides, right? One is more kind of, science and math, the other maybe English or history. That would be the perfect blend. But the most important thing here, when you're trying to figure out what teacher to ask, is who knows you the best and who likes you the best. Okay. I don't care who the kids say writes the best letter because realistically, none of them know what's in their letter because you're not supposed to ever see it. Right. So if they say Mr. Brown writes the best letters of recommendation, how do those kids know? Because they never saw the letter. So they're just kind of, that's just a little BS, right? Now, there are some teachers that share what they wrote because they want the student to know. Sure, great. But how many teachers do that? A very small percentage, right? But it is about who you know the best and also who likes you the best because you want them to be rooting for you. When they're writing their essay, you don't want them to feel like, oh gosh, I don't want to do this. You want them to make it feel like, oh my gosh. And if it was for me, David was such a great student. I want to make sure that he gets into the school that he wants. I want to write this great recommendation for him. Okay. And then finally, one thing that I do want to mention here is just because a college says that you can turn in 5 recommendation letters doesn't mean that you should or that you have to. Okay. 5 letters that say exactly the same thing don't do anything for you. Now, if you have people that are going to show different sides of you, maybe you worked during high school and you want to turn in an optional recommendation letter from your boss. And then you have a humanities teacher and a STEM teacher. That's great because those are going to show different areas. But if you have a STEM teacher, a humanities teacher, another STEM teacher, another humanities teacher, there's going to be overlap. And the one thing that we say we never want to see in an application is overlap. Okay. So that is another piece of the puzzle that students need to figure out as they're going into their senior year. Okay. The final piece of the puzzle is a college list. Okay. Now, juniors that are in our program, right? We are going to be kind of doing a more detailed college list kind of with you later in the spring, right? But the one thing that I will say here is that you need to be realistic about your college search. Okay. And I'm not saying you need to be realistic because I don't think a certain kid's going to get into Stanford or I don't think a certain kid's going to get into Harvard. But the reason why I'm saying that you need to be realistic is that a student only has a limited amount of time and energy to complete their applications. Okay. So sure, let's say that we have student A, right? Let's say they're a straight A student, 1600, they have a lot of extracurriculars, this and that, so on and so forth. Sure, can that student apply to every single Ivy League school and then just focus on that? Sure, right? Now, let's say that there's another student and their profile isn't really that conducive to it. Let's say they're like half A's, half B's, things like that, right? For both of those students, we need to make a determination if that makes sense for them, right? So for student A, high flyer. Student B, more average student, right? For the high flyer, it might not make sense to put all your eggs in one basket with the Ivy Leagues. Here's the reason why, right? Again, those colleges have acceptance rates that are less than 4%, right? You also have to look at the numbers and the time that you're going to spend to do those 8, 9, 10 applications, right? If you're spending all your time on those, you don't focus on your UCs, you don't focus on any CSUs, you don't focus on any schools that might be, top 30, top 40 schools. Well, the probability of you getting in is 3%, right? So, does it make sense to put all your eggs in one basket for that student? No. And then for a student that might be a little bit more average, A's and B's, right? maybe a C here and there. Again, it doesn't make sense to pour all your energy into just doing Ivy Leagues when the probabilities and the profile do not match that. Okay. So it all depends on your situation, but I'm not saying that students can't, right? Students are applying to more and more and more colleges every single year, right? Um, I think our record still is 43, right? But there's a lot of students that apply to, 20, 30, 35 campuses, right? But it is a more modern phenomenon that is happening, right? Instead, what I tell students is find a good grouping of like these dream schools, right? Target schools and safety schools. Okay. All right. So hopefully I gave you a little bit of kind of information there. I do see the questions coming in. So that's great. I'll go definitely ask that at the or answer those at the end. So if anyone else has questions, please make sure to answer them at the end as well. Now, financial aid for juniors. I kind of broke it up into two parts, parents and students, right? Because what the parent has to do and what the student has to do, a little bit different. So as we prepare for the kind of senior year financial aid kind of season, here's what parents need to do. First, your 2025 taxes need to get done ASAP, right? Now, normally they're due in April. I'm not saying that they have to be done exactly by April, but by the summer would be great. Now, if you're already part of our financial aid program, the reason why I want it earlier is because the longer I can look at it and kind of work on it, the better strategy that I can find out for your particular situation, right? So that's why I do it. Now, for other families that are not part of our program, the reason why you want it done earlier is because financial aid should open, and I put should because I never know what's going to happen with financial aid over the last like 3, 4 years, but it should open on October 1st. If you're one of those families that waits until October 15th or even later, right, to turn in your tax return, well, you're going to kind of miss kind of getting in at the beginning. Now, am I a huge proponent of being the first through the gates? Not necessarily. And for the last 3 years, with all the changes, I've actually told people to wait a little bit, right? Because I don't know what problems are going to occur, right? But if you're waiting until October 15th to file your taxes, well, you're realistically not going to get anything done until November, which is a little bit later than we would want it. But again, not a huge problem. But the earlier you can get it done, the earlier you can figure out what you can do with your taxes. Okay. Now, another thing, parents, that I really wish that you guys would do is have a real conversation about the cost of college with your student. Okay. College is not like, oh, well, we'll figure out a way to pay for it. It's not that anymore. Okay. The cost of college over the past 2.5 decades has gone up 700%. Right? Now, parents, you might have been working that long. Has your income gone up 700%? No, it hasn't. Right? And that's where the problem lies, right? So if we were making $100,000 25 years ago, now we're making $700,000. It's okay that college has also gone up 700%, right? The tuition costs, but that's not the case, right? So we need to make sure that we have a real conversation. And the real conversation is this, right? Parents, and again, I'm a little bit biased because again, my parents, I also went to private school. My parents had to pay for it. If I knew what I knew now, they wouldn't need to pay for it. But unfortunately, I didn't have the knowledge I had when I was actually going to college, right? But parents, you shouldn't be dipping into your 401k to pay for college, right? That actually hurts you more, right? You don't need to pull out money from your home in order to pay for college. Again, there's other ways, right? But you do need to have a real conversation with your student about, hey, this is what our family can afford, right? You also have a sibling that needs to go to college too, possibly, right? And give them a range, right? Now, again, I know too many parents, and I've seen this too many times, right? Where parents say, get in, we'll figure it out. But parents, let me give you the reality of what you're saying to your student. You're telling your student that if they get into a school, no matter what happens, you're going to send them. Let's say you make $150,000 a year. Okay. Well, let's say you make $200,000 a year well, let's even go higher. Let's say you make $300,000 a year to get over all those thresholds where you're going to get free tuition. So let's say you make $300,000 a year. You pay 30% in taxes. You're left with $200,000, right? You have a mortgage that's 5 grand, 5 grand a month, right? So you're down to now 140, right? You have other bills, property taxes, so on and so forth to pay. I'll call it another, I don't know, 50 grand. So you're down to $90,000. Your disposable income is now $90,000. What you have to pay, I don't know, let's just choose some random school. USC is $104,000 a year, right? Now, You said you're going to do anything in order to send your student to the college they want to go to. That means that now your $90,000 of disposable income is gone, right? Is that actually feasible? No, you still have to eat. So let's say that we leave that $90,000 there and we take $100,000 in loans to pay for school, right? What does that leave you with? That leaves you with an interest payment of $9,000 every single year your loan is there, right? Now, again, I'm exaggerating here. You actually can't take out that much anymore. But I want to bring this point up because not enough families have the conversations with their students about what is feasible and what is not. Okay. Again, I understand parents, right? You want to make your kids' dreams a reality, but there is a limit to what can be done. So have that conversation. Now, this is what parents need to do. I know there's a lot of parents here, but parents, you're not that important right now, right? Get your taxes done, have that conversation, and make sure that your taxes are ready to go when it's time. Okay. Now, for students, right? Again, students need to drive this because, well, students also have a section on the financial aid forms. You might be thinking, well, the student doesn't have anything. They don't have any assets. They don't have any income. What do they need to fill out? But everything starts from the student, right? The first thing that needs to come from the student is your college list, right? Like I talked about before, you need to figure out kind of what those colleges look like, create a balanced list that makes sense for you cost-wise and otherwise as well, right? Understanding why you want to go to that college. Again, if there's a particular reason, then maybe we do pay $100,000 a year. But another part that needs to kind of get done from students is the CSS profile, right? Now, in order to do the CSS profile, which is like the kind of like secondary form after the FAFSA that a lot of private schools ask for, you do need to have a College Board account. Most students, because they either took the PSAT or the SAT or an AP test, already have a College Board account. But here's my pro tip. If you end up going to a private college in the future, you will need your College Board account in the future. So change the email to a personal one, not your high school email. I've seen too many students where they've signed up with College Board with their high school email, and then once they leave high school, because the school doesn't want to pay to keep all those emails alive, they basically cut those emails, and so when you forget your password, you're not able to get your account access back. Okay. And then finally, for students, if they did make over the threshold, I think it's like $14,300, they will have to file taxes, so make sure that they file their taxes right away. Okay. All right. Now I talked about outside scholarships like last week a little bit about the scholarship displacement and things like that. But another thing that juniors should be doing if you haven't done it, right, is outside scholarships. Now, one of the things I always tell families is that yes, you should apply for outside scholarships, but whether we accept them or not will depend on the financial aid that you get, right? But where are they from, right? They are from outside organizations, right? You can think any outside company, right? Facebook, right? Instagram, right? Same company, right? Google, IBM, right? Canon, whatever it is, right? Whatever outside company, right? The financial aid refers to kind of federal aid, state aid, and the college institutional aid. Okay. Now, where do you find outside scholarships? Well, you can find them anywhere, right? I had that big list of scholarship places. The biggest one right now, I believe, is bold.org. That's where the biggest repository of scholarships is. But you should start early. You don't need to start when you're a junior. You can start when you're in fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, right? The organizations will basically hold the scholarship for you until you're a senior, right? Um, as far as kind of, when to start, the earlier the better, right? The other thing is, well, how often should I apply? Right? Now, generally speaking, when it comes to scholarships that are under $5,000, I tell families, hey, the win percentage on those is a little bit higher, maybe 10%, right? And then for scholarships that are like over, like five digits, right? And then I tell them, hey, the win rate for these is going to be at like less than 1%, right? So you have to always think about, okay, well, how many am I applying to? What's the win percentage? Like, what do I think I'm going to get? Right? Because again, you want to get a result out of your efforts. So it doesn't make sense to just apply to one and be like, oh, I'm done. Right? Like, let's say you apply for a 4-year all-inclusive paid scholarship, right? So the value of it is like, I don't know, $100,000 a year. That's a less than 1% win rate. How often are you going to win that? Well, less than 1% of the time, right? And so in order to kind of give yourself a shot, realistically, the more apps you apply to, the more chances you have. So remember, scholarships, yes, you do need to put your time and effort into them, but it's a numbers game as well. Okay. Now, takeaways, right? College is not a one-step process. I always talk about it. I'm one side of the process on the financial aid side, right? But there is another side to it, which is the admission side, right? There's so many things to take into account, but I really want students and parents to understand the colleges you're applying to and the costs associated, and if it is actually a reality or not. Right. So tuition, room and board, right? Transportation, books, right? Even application fees, right? For a student that's applying to, I don't know, 20 private schools, the application fees alone are $1,500, right? So you need to kind of take those things into account as you're going through this process, right? And also, you need to understand the steps for financial aid well before, like I kind of laid out here, so that you're not kind of like, oops, surprise, I forgot something, right? So it is important to make sure that you understand the process. Okay. Now, all we do is we ask people to ask for help, right? We have free consultations, so you can always reach out to us. If you're already one of our families, right? We just switched over to our website, right? You can send me a message, right? We'll also have a Q&A at the end, so if there are questions kind of lurking, make sure to put them in the Q&A or in the chat so I can kind of help you guys out. The one thing I think is that too many families go into the financial aid blind. I actually just had a family. I had a consultation with them, right? They're actually a senior. I told them I can help them. And then their student decided, you know what? I'm not going to wait and I'm just going to turn everything in. That family, realistically, they just lost out. We don't know where their kid's headed yet, but their family probably lost out on somewhere between 60 and $100,000, right? Because I told them to wait, make a decision, and then do things. But before dad had made a decision, the kid just turned everything in. Okay. So don't do it. I mean, if you are a senior and you're here, well, I need to talk to you like tonight, right? I don't know if I have any times available, but I might have some times available tomorrow. But if you're a junior, get in touch with us early so we can talk about it, see what your situation looks like. If I can help, I'll let you know. If I can't help, I'll let you know too, right? Plenty of families have come into consultations not knowing what's available, and I tell them what's available and they sign up. I also have families that come in, thinking that they are going to get something, and I'm like, sorry, in your situation, I can't help, right? So whatever it is, at least you'll get a, straightforward answer. Okay. Now, I do have some first results coming in from kind of our early and kind of different results. So I did want to share those with you. Okay. So this is a student, right, that just got into LMU. I think just found out last week. They also got their financial aid award. This is how much I was able to save them, right? So about $61,000. So their cost of attending this school is going to be about $30,000, right? Now, when you hear about the family, you're going to be a little surprised. This family made over $300,000. They own a home, they own a rental home, right? They also had a 529, which I told them to get rid of, right? And we can kind of talk, if you guys have questions about that, I can kind of talk about that, right? They also had investments and other kind of like brokerage accounts, but I was able to basically get them 67% off, right? That's a pretty good result for a student and a family where they are a higher income family, right? I also have this other one. Sorry about the blurriness, but this family was also in a very similar situation, right? They made right around $300,000, but I was able to basically get $85,000 off. This family is paying less than $20,000 a year to go to USC, right? I don't know if they're going to end up going to USC, right? But it's an option for them now, right? Because it's not $104,000 anymore, right? It's going to be like 19K, right? Much more manageable. Okay. All right. So I do want to open it up for questions, right? So I do see a couple in the Q&A. So if you guys have questions, please definitely do that. If you guys have questions for us, you can reach out 650-860-5201. You can also use that link, but it's going to take you to a link where the first available appointment is probably sometime in mid February, but again, that's too far away. So text us. You can also email us here as well. I'll put my email in the chat so that you guys can go ahead and also email me with any questions as well, right? If you don't feel comfortable asking me in this kind of group setting. Okay, but let's go ahead and start with a little bit of our questions. And again, other people that have questions, don't be afraid. I don't read out names, right? I basically just read your question and answer to the best of my ability. Okay, but we have a question here, and it said, is Spanish 2 in freshman year enough, or should we do Spanish 3 on UC Scout or Spanish 1 from a community college? So you just offered three different options that don't necessarily fit together, right? So if your student is a freshman and they took Spanish 2, or they took Spanish 2 as a freshman, the answer to your question is that Spanish 2, unfortunately, is not enough anymore, right? So colleges, right, even the UCs, which sometimes have the lowest requirements, even they are recommending that a student have 3 years of foreign language. Okay. So that means that they want to see you get to level three, right? And so you said, well, can we do Spanish 3 on UC Scout? Yeah, of course you can. And then the other one that you asked was, or Spanish 1 from a community college. Spanish 1 from a community college wouldn't take care of your third year of Spanish, right? So that wouldn't be necessarily an option, unfortunately, right? So you would need to either take Spanish 3 on UC Scout, BYU, another online high school, or you need to get placed in the equivalent of Spanish 3 at your local community college. But it's a lot harder to get placed in those kind of higher level classes and get Spanish 1 waived unless your student might be a native speaker or something like that. Okay. Or they're very talented in Spanish. Okay. We have another question here, and it says, can you suggest reliable websites to do college search based on various factors like rankings, tuitions, financial aid, GPA, SAT requirements, so on and so forth? So unfortunately, there's not a website that has all of that, all those filters, unfortunately, right? So you kind of have to pick and choose, right? But all of the websites have good information. So there's no like one source of truth, right? Now, I know that a lot of people use like US News and World, but a lot of that stuff is like blocked off. You can't see it unless you pay for it, which I think is a little bit of a jerk move, right? But yeah, you can't factor by all the different things that you mentioned there, unfortunately. But I mean, one that I think has a lot of information on it is like niche, right? But right, realistically for me, rankings don't really matter, right? Um, I've had too many students give up top 10, top 15, top 20 schools to go to something else that is lower ranked, because, well, it's a better fit for them, right? The example that I always use is this, right? The coding community and people, you can tell me if I'm wrong, right? Um, Always make fun of Mark Zuckerberg because he went to Harvard and he's studying computer science. Now, I'm not saying Harvard and computer science, like it's not a great place, right? But is Harvard known for computer science? No, it's not, right? So just because a school is good doesn't mean that it's good for your major, right? And so you should be thinking about that more than just a general ranking. Okay. But I like niche just to kind of see like where everything's sitting. I think it gives them the most amount of information. Okay. We have another question. It says, is 4 years of science required in highly competitive colleges? No, 4 years is not required, but most students that are getting into highly competitive colleges have more than 4 years of science, right? So you guys have to remember, right? When a college says these are our requirements, that's their minimum baseline. So if they tell you that 4 years of science is something that they want to see, that's the baseline. They want to see more. Okay. One of the things that we've always said is that we need to push the rigor, right? That's how you set yourself apart academically. Just doing what's available at school, 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of science, 4 years of, or 3 or 4 years of history. That's not enough anymore, unfortunately, right? I wish it was. I wish we lived in a different world, but we live in a very competitive world right now, right? So the real answer, if you're looking for a top 20 school, 4 years of science, depending on what your major is, might not be enough. Okay. We have another question. It says, can a student be considered first generation college student if their parents are foreign educated? Realistically, the answer is no, right? But again, it's about how you interpret the question. So whatever makes you feel like you answered the question is fine, right? Because the question says, has any of your parents gone to college? Not have any of your parents gone to college in the United States, right? So again, it all depends on how you interpret that question, but it shouldn't really matter, right? There are certain college systems like the UCs that do have preferential treatment for first generation college students. But when they see that, you're making $250,000 a year and you say that your dad's job is as an engineer or a IT professional or they're in finance, or they're a lawyer, they automatically know that you're not a first generation student, right? So again, the question is, how are you going to answer the rest of the questions, right? So if the story matches up, sure, great. If it doesn't, we'd want to answer with the answer that makes the most sense for us. Okay. All right. Any other questions? We'll do last call, right? I'm glad that people are asking questions, right? Uh, and so that's good, right? We have another question that says, if I want to do a business and marketing major with a psych minor, should I do a science and math my senior year to increase my chances to get into a UC? So I don't really care about minors because they never ask about minors. So again, I'm not saying I don't care about you, right? I'm saying I don't care when it comes to college admissions, right? If you're going into business, yes, it's automatic that you need to have a math and a science, right? And realistically, if you're going into business, the math level that you should be at is multivariable calculus. Okay. If you're not there, we need to figure out a way to get you there or get you way closer to there. Okay. Now, one of the complaints I always hear about is like, Coach David, like the rigor you're talking about is too hard. I can't do that. Well, then maybe we need to rethink your major options, right? Because the students that are applying to those majors are at those levels, right? Again, I'm not saying any of these things to disappoint or discourage anyone. I just want to make sure that you guys have a real view of what it looks like in today's college admissions landscape, right? Now, again, there was no questions about financial aid, right? So I'm guessing that I did a really good job there. But if you are a junior right now, if you're a sophomore, freshman, the youngest student I have right now is a fifth grader, right? Well, actually, he signed up when he was in fourth grade. Now he's in fifth grade, right? But nevertheless, if you're in high school right now, you need to talk to me to figure out the financial aid part of it because by the time your freshman is a senior, right? We'll just call it 4 years, right? The average college tuition and costs go up about roughly about 1.5% a year, right? So by the time your student is going to college, a private school might cost around 110, $115,000. Okay. We have another question here, and it says, students that finished their 4 years of high school math in their sophomore year, currently taking statistics junior year, can she skip math in senior year? No. The answer is no. Well, actually, the answer depends, right? So getting up to pre-calculus is not like, oh, I'm done with math, right? Depending on your major. Maybe you can give me a little bit more information about what the actual major is, right? Or what the student wants to study. But for most students, so pharmacy is not necessarily a college major. So I'm guessing they're going to study a STEM subject area. Pre-calculus and going into statistics, the math level's too low. We need to get higher. At the very least, calculus BC or at the community college level, calculus 2 level. But realistically, for STEM majors, the place we want to get to is multivariable calculus. Now, can your student do that? Yeah, they can do that because they can take Calc 1 in the summer at community college. They can take Calc 2 in the fall and then Calc 3 in the spring. So should we? The answer is yes, right? So again, I'm giving this information thinking that everything's a perfect world, right? Your student has enough time and energy to do everything, right? I'm not saying that it is feasible for every single student. I'm just saying in a perfect world, this is what we would love to see. Okay. And in a perfect world, all you parents should file your taxes by April 15th. Okay. But again, we can only hope for a perfect world, right? And then deal with the consequences. But I'm going to leave this screen up real quickly so that you guys can, text us. Also, the email is in the chat again. Please reach out to us. Don't reach out to us too late. Another reason why I say this is because, well, our prices for our financial aid program keep increasing, right? With everything else in our world, our prices do go up. So if you can lock in your price now, then you don't have to worry about what the price will be when your kid is a senior. Okay, so I'll leave this up real quickly for you guys. I hope you enjoyed today. I'll be back again next week. And if you have any other questions, please reach out. All right. Okay, everyone have a good night. Bye-bye.